Hey guys, I'm shooting this video. It's not really a subscriber question video, although I'm probably going to label it as such, just because, well, I guess you could consider me a subscriber to my own channel. I don't know. But once this video releases, I'll probably just be coming back from a really large conference talking about my research. I'm going to be presenting at this conference, so I'm really excited. But I'll be coming back and it's going to be a long flight, and I had to pre-record a lot of videos for you guys to make sure that we'd still have content. With that said, I wanted to cover a topic that through the private Facebook group that I have, I've noticed, and even through the Facebook page, I've noticed that there are several of you that are exercise science majors. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Exercise science and different fields, as well as what you can expect if you decide that you're thinking about maybe switching from, I don't know, accounting. One of my friends who went through this situation, maybe switching from something like accounting or finance or just anything that's not related to exercise science and thinking about going into exercise science. So really, when it comes to college, of course, with undergrad and grad school are going to be completely different. But in undergrad, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know, those first 2 years, you can expect to take general education courses. And keep in mind, I'm thinking about this in terms of United States universities. So you can expect the first 2 years to be a lot of science courses. And it depends which field of exercise science you go into. At least in my school, there's something called health fitness specialist. Then there's exercise physiology, there's biomechanics, there's sports psychology. All of those would fall under kind of the exercise science umbrella. Some are far more science-based than others. Well, I think they're all science-based, but some are far more hard science, we'll put it that way, or basic science or applied science. And there's certainly differences between all those. But exercise physiology, which is the degree that I got, one of my degrees is in exercise physiology, is heavy, it tends to be really heavy applied and basic science. So we're talking, you have to take your chemistries, you have to take physics, you have to take a bunch of physiology courses, of course, anatomy courses. You're going to have to take biology courses. You're going to have to do labs for all of those for your physiology, chemistries, and biology courses. I think in total I took 2 general biology courses, maybe 3 or 4 physiology courses, and this is just in undergrad. And I had 4 chemistry courses, and with every single one of those I also had a lab, so basically double that, and you've got 2 classes for each course, if you want to put it that way. So it's really heavy when it comes to learning the basic science, the molecular aspects of things, cellular aspects. And if you want to talk about something like biomechanics, that's also going to be really heavy science, but it's going to be maybe a little bit more on the applied aspect. You're going to have to learn certain mathematics that you might not have to learn as an exercise physiologist. And then if you talk about health fitness specialist, at least again from my degree, that was essentially exercise physiology, and then you take out your chemistries and your physics. And you still had to take a few of the physiology courses in there. So that's what you can essentially expect in your first 4 years. The first 2 years, I didn't really finish that point, is your general classes. So that's where you pack in your chemistries and your biologies. Then the latter 2 years, the final 2 years, is where you would take your physiology courses, your exercise physiology courses specifically. Exercise prescription, things of that nature, just so you can understand in clinical populations and in non-clinical populations, as well as potentially doing a few rotations if you end up doing or deciding to do some sort of internship, which is usually recommended. And then, of course, sports psychology. I do have a degree in psychology, but it's not specific to sports psychology. Sports psychology, you probably won't be taking really. I didn't have to take any of those chemistries initially until I ended up going for my exercise physiology degree. And suddenly, I needed to take all the chemistries and biologies and all that. So for psychology, I can say I didn't have to take any of that. So that's something to consider. It's essentially all the way on the other spectrum when it comes to the hard sciences. Now moving on to grad school, what you can expect is, instead of just taking coursework, and grad school is really a matter of time management. It is huge. Time management. If you don't have time management skills, grad school is going to be really tough, and you might just flunk even though you're a really good student, but you just can't handle all the different responsibilities that you're going to have. So in grad school, of course, you're still going to have to take courses, and those are going to be, of course, really heavy physiology courses. I'm going to talk about this from an exercise physiology standpoint, but you can have tons of physiology courses you might have to take, and you've got a lot more elective courses in terms of they're required. You have to take courses, but you can choose which types of courses you want to take, and you'll still get your degree. I will say though, if you're going to be going for your exercise physiology courses, I would highly recommend, and I don't want to say the word demand, but if I were a professor, which hopefully I will be one day, I would demand that my students learn physiology and take those harder courses, go the harder route. But you don't have to, you really don't. So you can of course go with taking more of those sports psychology courses, or sociology courses, or aging courses, things of that nature, which, I mean, they certainly bring value, but they're not molecular work, they're not cellular work like you would see in a lot of these graduate courses that you should be expecting. If you're not spending most of your time at the medical school as an exercise physiologist, then you're probably not taking as many of those really hard sciences that you could be taking, that you probably should. Again, my point of view, but if you disagree, feel free to let me know down below. I'm always open to different perspectives. With that said, in grad school, you also should typically choose between thesis and non-thesis routes. So a thesis, of course, is going through a year to 2 years of research and writing, and you have to go through a thesis proposal where you have to select your thesis committee. That's usually 3 individuals, 3 professors, 1 person that's outside of your department, and 2 people that are in your department. And then you propose to just that small group, and they tell you different feedback. They say if it's possible within the time frame that you're supposed to be there. And when I'm talking grad school, I'm talking master's program. PhD would be an extension of this, so that would be a dissertation as opposed to a thesis. And so they just tell you if it's plausible to be done within those 2 years. They tell you what they would add, what they would take away, things of that nature. And you're not obligated to follow what they say, but it's usually a good recommendation. Then you go through the actual research. You actually do the hands-on research. If you go the applied route, you'll be working more with people. If you use more of the basic route, you might work with people, but typically you're also working with cells. You're also working in kind of that molecular biology system, and that's essentially what I did. And then once you go through 6 months to 12 months to 18 months, I mean, I started really like from the get-go. I was already working on my projects, and I was working on 2 different projects. But anyways, so you start working on your project, you start working on your thesis in terms of collecting data, and then once you've got all that collected, then you have to go through the analysis process. And then unless you have a statistician, you have to do the stats on everything. And of course, you're going to be talking to your principal investigator, which is going to be the mentor that you have throughout this entire process. And after you go through that, you're going to have to do a lot of edits to your thesis proposal, which is, of course, a written document. And then from there, once you're ready, once you have your document finished and you have your results in there, you have your conclusion, your discussion, things of that nature, then you send that out to your thesis committee, and they will review it and tell you, well, actually initially they just get it, they read it, and then about a week later, 2 weeks later, you have your thesis defense. And that's going to be typically open to the public, so anybody can show up and you present. And then people ask you questions, essentially trying to figure out if you actually know anything about what you're talking about, because people can try and fake it and they'll get exposed. And then after you go through that process, you have a private meeting with your thesis committee, and they decide, and they ask you more questions, and of course then they decide if you deserve to get your degree. From that point on, they tell you to make certain revisions on your manuscript, and then hopefully it gets published, it gets sent to the graduate school, and you go from there. Then you've got your thesis, graduate school degree in exercise physiology. If you go the non-thesis route, trust me, it's not going to be as long of a story. It's essentially relatively the same, except you don't have to write anything necessarily. You just have to do a project, which is a really simple, well, I don't want to say simple, you still have to, you don't necessarily have to collect data. Sometimes you can already have data, and or one of your professors will give you data, and you have to interpret that data and then give a presentation. And then usually your project doesn't get rejected. It's just kind of just so you get some exposure to presenting to people that are familiar with your field, other exercise physiologists, other physiologists, things of that nature. So there you have it in terms of what you can expect. And if you've got, I've left out so many details, of course, because I don't want this video to be an hour long of me just talking about the different stages of grad school and undergraduate work. But if you're in exercise science, I would love to hear from you down below. At kinesiology, I think maybe there's a difference between exercise science and kinesiology. Exercise science might be more focused on doing the actual, like, learning the movements and stuff. For me, in kinesiology, we didn't learn any of that stuff. We didn't learn any of the movements. It was, you had to take a test and get different certifications, but we didn't actually have a specific class that was like, okay, this is how you move, this is how you squat. So that might be the difference between, exercise science and exercise physiology in terms of those two individual degrees from different schools. But if you have an exercise science degree or kinesiology degree, exercise physiology concentration, whatever it is, if it's related in that field, nutrition, sure, throw that in there. Feel free to comment below, and I would love to hear from you. Give me a day or two, because I've probably just gotten off the plane, and I am administering exams to my students that I'm teaching. So I will be quite worn out. So maybe tomorrow I'll be able to actually respond to people. And with that said, I will be back with, of course, the usual video that you guys have come to expect on Tuesdays and Thursdays coming up next week. Have a good one. See ya.